Thank you for watching this presentation, which will cover course information within the ILR. My name is Caroline Charlton, and I'm a Senior Analyst at the Office for Students. This recording will cover the key fields that relate to course data within the ILR and what we expect from providers when they determine values for these. I'll talk about the evidence that providers should be keeping and some of the common issues that we find when we work with providers on this data through audits or other assurance activity. I'll also talk a little about some of the things providers can do to improve data quality in this area. This slide lists the fields that I will be covering in this presentation. This includes fields relating to how courses are split over various subjects, and also fields required when teaching for a course is delivered by a partner provider. Course data within the ILR is used for various purposes, which are set out on this slide. For example, LearnAimRef is used to link to the LARS database, which allows us to derive the level of study. We also use that link, along with the LDCS proportions, to determine the subject of study, which is used in various metrics and also in the allocation of funding. Field LearnAimRef should capture the LearningAim reference from the LearningAim search database. Providers should apply for a LearningAim when they set up a new course, and we would also recommend that providers check the value of LearningAim search fields periodically. Providers should maintain evidence of the LearningAim a student is studying towards, and if a student changes LearningAim, then evidence of a request for that change should also be maintained. We do find errors in this field where the value of LearnAimRef does not match the student's aim. We consider it good practice for the LearningAim to be clear on enrolment documentation, so the student can be clear what they are signing up for. It's also good practice for providers to check that students are recorded with the expected aim, and this might be through a simple check that over the entire return you have the expected number of students on each course. It's necessary to have a process to ensure new courses are listed on the LearningAim search, and we recommend this process is started as soon as possible when you are aware a new course is starting up. Fields PartnerUKPRN and PColab need to be completed for subcontracted out provision. These are relevant when you have a partner provider delivering teaching on one of your learning aims. They reflect who is teaching rather than the location of teaching. These fields must be returned for subcontracted out provision, and they should be completed if any proportion of the aim is delivered by a partner provider in the year. This slide has a couple of examples which will demonstrate. The first is where a student is registered with College A, but is taught solely by staff employed by College B. College A will return the student, and PartnerUKPRN and PColab need to reflect that staff from College B are teaching the student. PartnerUKPRN will give College B's UKPRN, and PColab should be 100, as the student is taught solely by College B's staff. College B will not return the student in the ILR. The second example is where a student is registered with College C and is taught by College C's staff at a site owned by College D. College C will return the student, and PartnerUKPRN and PColab are not required, as there is not a partner provider delivering teaching. College D will not return the student in the ILR. We do quite often find issues with these fields. Commonly, we find that fields have been omitted although provision is subcontracted out. And it's good practice to have checks that where you are subcontracting out provision, you are completing these fields for the expected number of students. We also find errors with PColab, in particular where very small values are returned in error. It's worth noting that if a course is subcontracted out 50% of the time, PColab should have the value 50 and not 0.5. That's a common error, so it's definitely one to look out for. Field PCFLDCS and the other two similar fields capture the proportion of the course attributed to each relevant LDCS code. If a learning aim is allocated to only one LDCS code, then PCFLDCS should be 100. Otherwise, you will need to determine an appropriate split across the relevant subjects represented by the LDCS codes for the learning aim. The three fields must sum to 100, and the proportions should be determined at course level rather than for individual students. We expect that providers will maintain evidence that the split returned reasonably reflects the subject split of the course, and also that the split returned has been subject to appropriate approval. Again, I have some examples to illustrate how this can be implemented. The first is where a student is studying on a course where the LearnAIM reference service records 3 LDCS codes. If the provider judges that the course activity is split equally over the 3 subject areas, then all students on the course should be returned with values 34, 33 and 33. As you can see, the 3 values here sum to 100 as required. If a student on year 1 misses part of the year and only studies modules in one subject because they don't need to study the others, they should still be returned with values 34, 33 and 33. This is because these values should be the same for students on the same course and year of course, and do not need to be changed to reflect that this student is not undertaking the full year of the course. We frequently find issues with these fields when we work with providers. Commonly, we find that the fields record an equal split across LDCS codes, even when this is not necessarily the most appropriate split based on the course subject. We also frequently find that providers are unable to explain how the split returned has been derived. We do find good practices in this area, such as cases where it's clear that the split has been reviewed whenever a course has changed. I'm now going to talk about some of the things providers could do to improve data quality in this area, both internally and using the data checking tool that we provide. I've already highlighted that we would recommend that providers review LARS data periodically. In terms of checking data within the ILR, a check that the expected number of students are registered for each course can be really useful in identifying any errors in LearnAimRef, and also if students have just been missed for some particular reason. We would recommend that you check that the relevant fields are populated for subcontracted out provision. Again, this could be a very high level check to ensure that if you're subcontracting out 100 students, for example, there are 100 students in your ILR with the relevant fields populated. Periodic checks that LDCS code proportions are aligned with course designs could be carried out. And you may also want to use validation to ensure that LDCS proportions sum to 100. We make available a data checking tool each year, and there are various queries within this that we hope will help you in checking your course data. We will highlight when we are unable to identify subject for individual students. Ideally, we'd like you to check each of these, identify the reason for this, and make corrections to the data so that subject can be determined. We will also highlight unexpectedly low percentages in field PColab, which captures the proportion of a year taught by another provider. This is because we frequently find errors in this area, and we want to check that very low values are genuine. Finally, we will provide proportions of students across course aspects such as level and subject. A sense check of this data may identify errors. For example, if the subject mix is not as expected, this may indicate errors in LearnAimRef. Thank you for listening to this presentation. I hope you found it helpful. If you have any queries, please do feel free to get in contact with us.